The Audacious-class was the last remaining conventional British catapult and arrested landing aircraft carrier. From the outset, ships of this class were affected by the confusion caused by a changing world and advancing technology. Their retirement also marked the United Kingdom's realization that it was no longer a superpower. Today we're investigating the Audacious-class, the last fleet carriers of the era of the setting sun. Although HMS Eagle and HMS Ark Royal were both members of the Audacious-class, they differed significantly in many aspects. Since they were laid down, numerous changes occurred, leading to ongoing separate modifications for each. Their history also reflects what happened to the Royal Navy as the sun set on the Empire. In 1941, the Royal Navy, which had already lost 3 carriers in combat, began to consider new designs. The need for increased survivability, especially a protected flight deck capable of withstanding 500-pound bombs, became a priority. The Admiralty also judged that the new carrier should have carried at least 64 aircraft to sustain effective all-day carrier air patrols. Meanwhile, the war hastened technological progress, resulting in fighters and bombers growing larger and heavier each day. A larger flight deck was necessary to speed up flying-off operations. Such changes also required an increase in crew, stores, ammunition, and spares. In summary, the new carrier needed to be larger. To shorten the timeline, the Royal Navy initially considered keeping the basic hull design of the Implacable class. However, it became clear that the hangar weight would not accommodate the new aircraft, so the design was significantly enlarged in 1942. The Royal Navy intended to deploy these fleet carriers in the Pacific against the Imperial Japanese Navy. However, its primary focus remained on Atlantic operations, where they were unneeded. Consequently, the program was delayed. The first ship was laid down on October 24, 1942 as HMS Audacious, giving the class its name. However, she was launched on March 19, 1946 as HMS Eagle and commissioned on October 5, 1951. The second carrier was laid down on May 3, 1943 as HMS Irresistible. She was launched on May 3, 1950 as HMS Ark Royal and commissioned on February 22, 1955. HMS Eagle was laid down on April 19, 1944, but was cancelled in January 1946 at 23% completion. Her name was later assigned to the first ship. The order for the fourth carrier, HMS Africa, was changed to a vessel from the cancelled Malta class, but she was never laid down. The Audacious class featured 115mm belt armor. Underwater protection consisted of stacked oil fuel and seawater in 2 external compartments. It could withstand an explosion from a torpedo with a 545 kg warhead, possibly even a 908 kg one. The flight deck armor was initially 102 mm and was reduced to 37 mm during refits in the 1960s. The thickness of the hangar armor ranged from 25 to 63 mm. Steel shielding protected the ammunition stores, fuel tanks, and diesel generator rooms. Subsequent refits over time changed the ship's specifications. For example, HMS Eagle's fully laden displacement increased from 43,060 tons at commissioning to 53,390 tons at decommissioning following several refits. Initially, she lacked an angled deck. A 5.5 degree one was added in 1954, and the angle was increased to 8.5 degrees in 1964, expanding the flight deck width from 31.2 to 52.1 meters. Similarly, HMS Ark Royal's fully laden displacement increased from 43,750 tons at commissioning to 54,820 tons before retirement due to modifications during her service. The Audacious class had superb maneuverability and sea-keeping qualities. Its tactical turning diameter at 30 knots with a 35-degree rudder was 775 meters, resulting in only a 5.3-degree heel. HMS Ark Royal experienced persistent mechanical reliability issues, even though it was completed after HMS Eagle, which had a relatively smooth career. She had been poorly preserved during her construction from 1942 to 1955, and her machinery was already outdated at completion, with all her old DC electrics and a few AC systems, leading to a continuous series of electrical faults. The Royal Navy intended to retire HMS Ark Royal first when the CVA-01 class carriers entered service, but the cancellation of that program extended her operational life. The Audacious class was initially armed with 8 twin 114mm Mark III guns, offering an anti-aircraft range of 12,500 meters and a rate of fire of 16 rounds per minute per barrel. They could remain operational at up to 20 degrees of heel, and the ship carried 6,600 rounds of 114mm ammunition. Following refits, HMS Eagle's armament was reduced to 4 guns, and all turrets were removed from the HMS Ark Royal. HMS Eagle was armed with 8 sextuple, 2 twin, and 9 single 40mm L-60 anti-aircraft guns. The rate of fire of each barrel was 140 rounds per minute. Its range was 7,160 meters. They were later replaced by 6 GWS-24 Seacat launchers, each with 4 rails. The air defense missile, carrying an 18-kilogram warhead, had a range of 5,000 meters and a speed of Mach 0.8. HMS Ark Royal was equipped with 6 sextuple, 2 twin, and 12 single 40mm L-60 anti-aircraft guns. She lost all of them during the refit and was not fitted with Seacats either. However, 4 Corvus decoy launchers were installed. During the initial design phase, the Audacious class was intended to carry 78 aircraft, with 64 housed in the hangar and the remaining 14 on the flight deck. This number was reduced to 60 upon completion and to 45 in the 1960s. 2 16.4-meter long elevators connected the hangar to the flight deck. The forward one was 13.4 meters and the aft one was 10 meters wide. Noses of longer aircraft were swung to fit the elevators. HMS Ark Royal initially had a third onboard elevator measuring 17.5 meters by 10.7 meters, which was removed in the late 1950s. HMS Ark Royal was the first carrier built and launched with an angled deck rather than being retrofitted with one. HMS Eagle received this facility during a later refit. The Audacious class was equipped with 2 43-meter BH-5 catapults. The designated relaunch rate was 1 aircraft every 40 seconds. HMS Ark Royal was later refitted with 2 64-meter BS-4 catapults to launch F-4K Phantom FG-1s. Due to their length, one was installed on the waist and the other one on the port side forward. HMS Eagle did not receive new catapults. She could still launch a fully laden F-4K under certain conditions, but lacked proper jet blast deflectors. As a result, Phantom FG-1s were not deployed as a part of our standard air group. During their service, the Royal Navy operated the Fairey Firefly, de Havilland Sea Hornet and Hawker Seafury piston engine fighters, Fairey Barracuda, Blackburn Firebrand, and Grumman TBF Avenger piston engine torpedo bombers, Westland Wyvern turboprop strike aircraft, Supermarine Attacker, Hawker Seahawk, de Havilland Sea Venom, de Havilland Sea Vixen, and F-4K Phantom FG-1 jet fighters, Supermarine Scimitar, and Blackburn Buccaneer jet strike aircraft, Skyraider AEW-1 and Gannet AEW-3 early warning aircraft, Gannet AS-4 anti-submarine warfare aircraft, and Skorsky R-6A, Weston Hoverfly, Bristol Sycamore, Weston Whirlwind, Weston Essex, and Weston Sea King helicopters from the Audacious class. In 1963, HMS Ark Royal was the first to trial the new vertical short takeoff and landing Hawker P-1127 prototype, the forefather of the Harrier. After the last refit, the complement of HMS Ark Royal was 2,640 personnel, including 260 flagship staff. The ship had a length of 257.6 meters, a beam of 34.4 meters, and a draught of 11 meters. Her standard and fully loaded displacement were 43,060 and 50,786 tons, respectively. The propulsion system comprised 8 Admiralty 3-drum boilers and 4 Parsons geared turbines, producing a total of 152,000 horsepower. HMS Ark Royal's maximum speed was 31.5 knots. She had a range of 7,000 nautical miles, equivalent to 12,965 kilometers, at a speed of 14 knots. On October 29, 1956, Israel attacked Egypt as a part of a coordinated plan with France and the UK. These two declining superpowers would intervene in the conflict and seize the Suez Canal, which had been nationalized 3 months earlier. On November 1, 1956, aircraft from HMS Eagle, including Seahawks, Wyverns, and Sea Venoms, began a 6-day airstrike on Egyptian airfields and positions. The air groups completed 621 sorties despite a malfunctioning catapult. Despite the tactical success of the operation, it ultimately proved futile. The new superpowers, the USA and the USSR, intervened, forcing France and the UK to withdraw. In 1964, HMS Eagle set sail for the Far East to support the UK's effort during the Indonesia-Malaysia confrontation. The Royal Navy later deployed her to East Africa to deter a possible Rhodesian invasion of Zambia. Subsequently, she participated in the Beira Patrol, a blockade intended to prevent oil from reaching Rhodesia. HMS Eagle was decommissioned on January 26, 1972. The Royal Navy kept her in reserve until 1976, although she was fully cannibalized for HMS Ark Royal during this period. The carrier was sold for scrap on October 14, 1978. HMS Ark Royal never participated in a combat mission. However, that does not mean that she was not involved in any critical operations. The Royal Navy deployed her to the Far East to support the UK's effort during the Indonesia-Malaysia confrontation. She also took part in the Beira Patrol. On November 9, 1970, during a NATO exercise in the Mediterranean, HMS Ark Royal collided with her shadow, the Soviet Kotlin-class destroyer Bravi. In 1972, the carrier launched 4 Buccaneers from a position over 900 kilometers from Belize to deter a potential Guatemalan invasion. 2 of the aircraft provided aerial refueling, while the remaining 2 carried air-to-ground munitions. The Royal Navy decommissioned HMS Ark Royal on February 14, 1979. The Audacious-class was comparable to the US Essex class, which was under construction around the same time. Although they were similar in size, the British carriers were heavier and could carry fewer aircraft. What factors contributed to their lower efficiency compared to US carriers? The US Navy's potential operating areas were generally far from air bases. In contrast, the British Empire could support its fleet with ground-based aircraft in many regions. The UK's potential adversaries generally lacked fleets capable of challenging the Royal Navy at sea. However, Japan, the USA's main rival, was a formidable opponent. On April 1, 1924, the Fleet Air Arm of the Royal Air Force was established. The date was notable for British naval aviation. Just 2 weeks earlier, the Royal Navy had commissioned HMS Hermes, the world's first ship designed and built as an aircraft carrier. On the other hand, since 1921, the US Navy had maintained its own aviation branch. As a result, the Royal Navy was less inclined to invest in carriers and carrier-based aircraft than the US Navy. On May 24, 1939, the Fleet Air Arm was returned to Admiralty control. Nevertheless, a few months later, when the Second World War broke out, the UK's priority was to defend sea routes from German raiders. London focused on building anti-submarine sloops, frigates, and destroyers. Consequently, the British did not prioritize efficient carrier design or develop the same level of expertise as the Americans. Differences in strategic needs and circumstances led to divergent approaches. Nonetheless, the Audacious-class served the Crown well during the most critical times when the British Empire was collapsing. HMS Eagle and HMS Ark Royal the last conventional catapult and arrested landing aircraft carriers of the Royal Navy, truly deserve to be called legends. Thanks for watching our video. And please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click the bell button to be notified of our new videos. For more contents like this, please consider clicking the join button to support our channel. And as always, we would greatly appreciate all of your likes, comments, and shares.